Hiya, I'm Jasper, and welcome to your video review for The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings, Extended Edition, the only edition that you should watch. So, as always, I'm going to give you the good, the bad, and the furry. So to start off with a little bit of the furry, there's black riders that are riding black horses, and then Build a Pony makes an appearance, and, Gandalf has his little pony type thing pulling his stuff. But a lot of the rest of the creature type things I don't really want to get into because I feel like it spoils things a bit. So I might get into that in the spoiler part of the review. So from there, let's talk about who's in this. So you have so many actors in this because they eventually form, the Fellowship. So there is Elijah Wood, and then there is, you know what, I'm just going to stick with the character names because I feel like that'll be easier for you. So you have Frodo, you have Sam, you have Marietta Brandywine, and Peregrine Took, and then you have Gandalf the Grey, Aragorn / Strider, you have Legolas, Gimli, you have Boromir, and you have Elrond, who's a pretty big one, Arwen, and and then, of course, the Black Riders, such as they are, and then Bilbo also. I'm sure that there's others that I'm forgetting, because one of the things that I like about this movie is that there is so much that happens. So those of you that are book purists, you might be like, oh, it doesn't match the book. But the thing is that I think that there is some things that need to change between book adaptations and movie adaptations. So, like, for example, the ending of, Princess Bride, book versus movie, movie's better. Book versus movie for Fight Club, movie's better. The other thing, though, is that I'm not necessarily saying that this movie is better than the book, because the books, there's whole college courses about the books. But what I will say is that they mess up the beginning, especially of the books, in a way that works for the movie. So I read the books growing up. I really loved them growing up. And then I watched this movie. And even the first time I watched this movie, I was like, you know what? They may not have matched the book exactly, but they cut out what they needed to in order to give it momentum and to make this, the extended edition's almost 4 hours, but even the non-extended version is 3 hours. So they needed to cut some things out. For example, it was about 50 years between when Frodo got the ring and when he actually left to go on his adventure in the book. But you can't take that kind of time. You can't take that kind of time in this. It doesn't make any sense, thematically. It just doesn't. Once you watch this movie a couple times and you go back and you look at where Gandalf went and came back to, you're going to be like, oh, he did that journey. Okay, so it was a little bit. But overall, I think that they cut it out. They cut out what they needed to in order to give the film momentum, and then they changed a couple of the characters to a different character in order to make things, again, flow and to give that theme throughout. Because I think that it was necessary for the theme to work throughout the movie to have that connection point. And I will say, just to give you an idea of my perspective on things, again, so I read the book, watched the movies, watched the extended editions, and I bought that 10-disc Blu-ray set, and I watched pretty much all of the special features at one point or another. And so, I have seen the filmmaker's perspective on things. So maybe my hey, does the movie survive on its own by itself? Maybe that isn't as applicable here. But from all of the knowledge that I have, and from just rewatching it, I still feel like the movie on its own holds up by itself on its own without having to refer to the books or the special features in order to explain things. I will say that I liked the extended edition more, and I think that they should have gone with the extended edition to start with, but I understand, theater runtimes, you have to encourage people to see it, and trying to get them to see a 3-hour movie is difficult. Trying to be like, hey, this is a 4-hour movie, people are like, nope. But definitely watch the extended edition if you have a choice. I believe that right now they are on HBO Max, because some of the streaming services only have the non-extended edition, and I think you should watch the extended edition. So, with that, I'm going to get into a little bit of spoiler territory. So, if you haven't seen the movies yet, just understand that these movies are absolutely phenomenal. They may have come out in the early 2000s, but literally, just rewatching it on a streaming service, the only thing CGI-wise that I don't think stands up as well is when they are on the race to the bridge to Khazad-dûm. There's that chunk of thing that they're standing on that kind of starts to sway. Once you get to that part, you'll know what I'm talking about. And that, when things are falling around there, that doesn't look as realistic. I would say that was a little I'm not sure on the physics of that. But everything else, solid. So I just trust that the Weta Workshop that made this film and the dedication that Peter Jackson and all the rest of them had and New Line Cinema had for the creation of this film. They had all the practical things that they needed. They had all of the CGI, and they used it where they needed to, but used practical where they couldn't do it otherwise. And that is one of the things is that they coined the term bigatures in this one because back in the day before CGI was just do everything CGI because it's easier. There was miniatures that you film up close in order to duplicate, like if you wanted to explode the White House in Independence Day, you'd use a quote unquote miniature for that. But because of just the scale of how large these quote-unquote miniatures were, they started calling them bigatures because of how big they were. And I think it totally makes sense because if you watch the special features, these are some huge things that they made, even though they are at smaller scales than they would be. And before I get into the spoiler thing, I do also want to point out that the action works amazingly. Even when there was a sudden fire, you're just like, no, I buy that. I totally buy that. And then so any of the action that's going on, spot on. The CGI spot on. And you can't tell me that you have a more memorable series of songs or music in a movie than this movie series. I'm including the other two in this a little bit because like the Rohan things, like those. But man, you have so many themes in this one, and just every one of them is distinct and super, super memorable. Like the Shire and just so many of the others. I don't want to spoil those so much, but like the music is so memorable in this and so well done that just two enormous thumbs up for the music in this. So awesome for that. And then they got so lucky with all of the actors with this. I know there was some drama with the whole Aragorn got replaced like really early on in filming, but they definitely made the right choice. I did like the actor that they had chosen. I never got to see any footage from when he was doing it, but the reasoning behind it, I definitely understood. And because of how amazing Viggo Mortensen is, I'm fine with them having replaced that with him because he is just so fantastic and he lives it. And if you watch the special features, like he is just dedicated to the sword that he has and the clothing, and then just he acts through the pain. If you know which part I'm talking about for later on movies, but this is just so fantastic. You gotta see it. You gotta see it and just appreciate the majesty of a well-made film. So Lord of the Rings of Power, kind of garbage, especially when so much of it is just there's not distinct feelings for things. It doesn't seem lived in. Like I get that it's a TV show budget, but it's an expensive TV show budget, and this had so much more care with it. There was so much more enthusiasm and appreciation for the Tolkien works that Peter Jackson and the rest of the actors brought to it. So awesome movie. Some of the spoiler things. So spoiler alert. Now getting into some spoiler things. The fact that so much happened in this movie. I mean, just think about it for a second, will you? So first off, Gandalf comes, says hi to Frodo. They review how he got the ring. Then they go down. They have a party. They have like interactions at the party. Then he comes back, talks with Gandalf. Then he leaves. Then Frodo comes and he talks with Gandalf. Then Gandalf makes a journey to Minas Tirith. He comes back. They have another interaction. Sam comes. They talk with him. Then they bundle all up. And then they leave to go to the Prancing Pony or whatever. And then along the way, like the Black Riders first comes, which the Black Riders get introduced off screen or like, off where they're actually at. They get introduced there. They come here. You see them finding out where Hobbiton is. They get to Hobbiton. Frodo almost puts on the ring. They meet up with Peregrine Took and Mariotic Brandybuck. They meet up with them. And then, again, almost the ring thing. Then they escape in like this harrowing chase sequence from the Black Riders. They make it to the Brandywine Ridge or river. They cross the river. They get to the thing. Then they're like, hey, let us in. They go in. Then they have this whole sequence in the Inn of the Prancing Pony where, there's drinking, there's laughing, there's talking, and then they find out that Gandalf's not there. Oh, by the way, Gandalf, you know why he's not there? Because he had this whole thing with fucking Saruman where he has this like wizard fight with him and then he gets dragged up to the ceiling and then he's out there and then, so there's all these, so you're setting up the next like 2 or 3 movies with Saruman he's starting to tear down these trees, he's starting to burn things, he's starting to rip things out, he's making Uruk-hai, okay? He's straight up making an entire frickin' army, and just seeing the genesis from like the field with some trees to what it turns into by the time the second movie rolls around. Spoiler alert for the second movie. So then so that's all happening. They get to the Prancing Pony. Aragorn saves them. The nine come in. They stab the pillow things. Then these guys, they escape. They find out that he doesn't know about second breakfast, and then they make it to Weathertop. Then there's that whole sequence up in Weathertop where he gets stabbed, and then, okay, now we need to go run away. Then one of those characters that was replaced, Arwen, comes in, and she puts him on horseback and runs away from the nine, which, by the way, imagine if they'd had bows and arrows, just saying. So she escapes, get to the river whooshes them away, and that takes care of them for like a whole movie. So that was some serious riverage. So he gets there, and then he wakes up, he's saved, Gandalf is there because he escaped on an eagle, which, maybe I need to reread the books, but I still don't understand why the eagles couldn't have taken them to Mordor, but whatever. So they wake up, and all the hobbits are there, and they're happy, and then you get to meet the rest of the Fellowship in that, Boromir immediately is, about to touch the ring, and Gandalf's like, fuck you, here's some black magic, words, and then Gimli tries to bust it with his axe, explodes an axe. Not the only time his axe will explode against magic things. Just throwing that out there. Pay attention to next movie. So they do that, and that's just the start. That's just to get to the Fellowship, man. Woo! So then they have their whole talkie sequence, and then Frodo realizes he has to carry the ring, so he volunteers to take it, even though he thought he was just going to be able to go back home, and everybody did. But then the rest of the hobbits are like, well, we're going too, because he's our friend, and I love that. Just no, man, we're going too. Where are we going? Just the dedication to Frodo from the start. So then the Fellowship leaves, and they try up the Caracas Pass or whatever, and then Sauron with his magic spire of magic amplitude is storming the hell out of them. And it's really neat if you pay attention to Legolas. He doesn't sink in the snow because that's a thing from the book. He is super strong and super awesome, doesn't need to sleep, yada yada yada. But one of the things is that elf, they don't sink in the snow, and it's so cool that they included that in there because I'm sure that was not an easy thing to do. They could have just had him in the back, along with everybody else, trudging away through the snow. But the fact that they included that in there, even though it was just that little part, in no other parts of this entire franchise do you ever see elves on snow or making use of the super light nature of themselves, really. But they included that there because that is the level of care that they had for this series. Anyway, so they try that, they give up, they go back down, they let the Hobbit decide. The Hobbit says, let's go into the Mines of Moria. Then they get stuck at the door, he's trying a bunch of things, doesn't work. They finally figure out the riddle, they try and go in, and then the fucking, Tentacruel monster comes out and, tries to eat them, brings down the thing on top of himself. Then they make their way through, then they get lost again, then they find their way, continue to establish more about Gollum. Then they go, a whole bunch of orcs come. They have that whole battle sequence in that tomb area where, Frodo gets stabbed just like in the book. Rewatch, the first time I watched it, I'm like, how does he not have crushed ribs? It may not have pierced him, but how does it? Thing is that if you look, it's like a pronged thingy, and so the big prong stuck in the wall, and the little prong was piercing him, but didn't actually pierce him. So that's how you get the, sticking without the necessarily, total crushing of ribs type of thing. I still think there would have been a little bit more internal damage than they showed, but Mithril is Mithril, so what do I know? So then after they fight that whole group of orcs and cave trolls, and I like how Legolas tries from the top and the head, the skull, bounces those arrows off, so then he eventually kills it by going underneath. That's genius. And it shows that the hobbits are totally willing to fight. It's not like Indiana Jones where the girl can't fight. It's just oh no, no. The hobbits, they're hardy, they may not be the best fighters, but push come to shove, they're not going to crawl in a corner and cry. So I love that. So they all fight, and then they run out into the main area, which I feel had too many columns. It's beautiful. I think it's referenced from one of the more famous paintings. There was a reference to Tolkien's work, but I feel if I was going to enjoy an area that huge, should have tried to have less columns. I realize they're holding up an entire mountain, but still. Anyway, so the Balrog comes. And then they have this whole running away sequence, and that's when they're running to the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, and the rock hits the first part of the little staircase leading down, and the rock hits the other part, and then when those rocks tumble, and then when that part of the bridge, or part of the stairwell tumbles, that, I want to say even the first time I watched it, didn't hold up to me. I was like, that doesn't look quite realistic, but that's really the only part. But I love that they threw not the beard, because he barely makes the jump. and then the others make it, and then they're running, and I do think it's funny. I do think it's funny that when Balrog first appears, Gandalf is like, swords are no more use here. Except for in the second movie where you kill him with your sword. Just throwing that out there. Anyway, so they're all running. They make it to the bridge. They run across the bridge, and then they're like, the thing that hopefully everybody on Earth knows is like, you shall not pass. And like, there's the theory of like, okay, he was shattering the bridge to make it so that when the thing stepped on it, then he fell, or that it was just really magic. Like, I like to think it was kind of a combination of both, but it was awesome to see. And then, you think he makes it, and then, nope, it winds him and pulls him down. Even when the first time I watched it, I was still like, he has some upper body strength. He's a wizard. I feel like he could have held on or like grappled up a little bit more as opposed to just releasing and falling. But I do, we needed to get Gandalf the White, so it's fine. It's one of those things where I'll let it go. But yeah, so then they make it out of there into the sunlight, and then they make it into, I don't think it's Mirkwood, the Galadriel Forest. I forget the name of it. But so then they make it there, and they have their whole interaction, and then, like, something that you may not notice, but, like, they have that argument of, like, the Elvish originally, like, no, you're not going. And then Aragorn has this argument with him in Elvish, and then he's finally like, okay, we'll take you to Galadriel, and she'll deal with you. So I love those little things that you may not notice the first time around. So then they get to Galadriel, and she's having this, like, dual conversation with the Fellowship and with Frodo in her mind, and then they have the pouring of the, things that are, things that were, and things that may not yet come to pass, that whole thing, and then I'm sure that was an expensive sequence to film for the, like, picturing of what happened to the Shire. I don't remember. I think that was going to be, like, a whole thing, but then they just made it the dream sequence type of thing. But they had that whole thing happen. And then they finished with that, and then they're like, okay, we're going to go. And so then in the extended edition, they include, like, her gifting the things to the Fellowship, which I think is important because it does a better job of explaining how he ended up with the Light of Elendil and how the rest of them ended up with their green cloaks in the future movies. So, anywho, so then they make it, they're going along with boats, and then it's cool to see all, like, the, the hand-stoppy thing and just the majesty of it. Like, Peter Jackson knows the exact right amount of time to enjoy the majesty of a thing and then move along, It's just the right amount to appreciate it without being like, okay, let's speed this up. It's just the right amount in these movies anyway. So then they get to the shore, and then Boromir once again like tries to take him out because the ring is showing that effect, and it's all about that show not tell. Like, you're seeing the effect that the ring is having on him because he is such a noble guy and such a great guy. They do such a good job in future movies going into that. So yeah, great action there, and then. Frodo runs away. Sam's like, I'm coming with you. And Frodo's like, no, I'm going alone. And Sam's like, yeah, you are going alone, and I'm going with you. And I just love that he's just like, not even a question. It's just like, yeah, you are going alone with me. That's how we're doing this. And I love that for it. So, and then he saves him. They cross the river. And then Boromir is like, shit, I fucked that up. I'm going to do better. And then the other hobbits are like about to get captured. So he's like, I'm going to make my redemption here. So he takes on all the fucking Uruk-hai and manages to get like several arrows in him. And these are big fucking arrows, like especially because you just watched Legolas shoot a bunch of arrows with Aragorn further up the hill. Legolas arrows are taking motherfuckers out, and they are like thin. And then you get these Uruk-hai arrows, and they're like just like, here you go, here's half your chest missing. It's like the 50 cal of arrows. And he takes several of them because he's a bamf. And then Aragorn fights that like head Uruk-hai, and like real world, Viggo Mortensen straight up fucking deflected that blade with his sword that was thrown at him, and that wasn't supposed to happen. I love that like fucking Viggo Mortensen is such a bamf that he's just like, bing! Like, when it was, like, because whatever fucking guy screwed up, either wasn't supposed to release it, I don't remember, but that was not supposed to happen, and he fucking deflected it, and that's in the movie, and that's awesome. What's not awesome is that as he's running over to Boromir, he kicks one of the dead Uruk-hai in the head, and the guy, like, goes, what? So, just nowadays, that would be CGI'd back down so that wouldn't have happened. But CGI was more expensive back then. But yeah, so then Legolas and them, and they try to fight. They find Boromir. Boromir's dead. The hobbits have been taken. And so then Legolas is like, let's go after Frodo. And Aragorn's like, nah, bro, we got to go after the other hobbits. Let Frodo do his thing. And they're like, okay. So then they're like, let's go. Like, just think about that. That took a long time for me to summarize. Like, if you're still here, thank you. But that's just my summary of, like, the high points and what happened. There is so much stuff that happens in this first movie. Like, my goodness. The other movies, they are good, but there's a couple of times where they get bogged down with fight sequences that last a long time. Awesome though those are, I feel like this movie, partly because I've watched it the most number of times, because sometimes I get like, I'm going to rewatch it, and then I only watch the first one and get distracted by other things. But this is the movie where I think the most amount of things happen. Just the sheer change of things from like Frodo being like, well, no, don't give me the ring. You need to take it, to being like, well, hey, no, I'll take it, to the prancing pony. No, okay, I'll take it to Rivendell. Actually, you know what? I'm going to take it all the way to fucking Mordor. And then, you know what? I need to leave these people because it's just hurting them, all the powers of the ring. So I'm going to separate. Like, such a huge character. It's just the first movie. So good. So this movie and like The Matrix are, well, this trilogy and the first Matrix and a little bit of the second two, 2 and 3, are like my Citizen Kane of movies, in my opinion. Yeah, Citizen Kane for the time period was great, but these I think will stand the test of time because I just rewatched them, and all the CGI, all the action, music, acting, pacing, etc., all of that still holds up. It is still an awesome time to watch. Don't let current things ruin your enjoyment of this trilogy. I know that for the longest time I did not like the Hobbit trilogy because it was such a downturn from this one, minus Legolas. But this movie and the trilogy really stand the test of time and should definitely be something that you and everybody should watch at least once to just appreciate it. And maybe you'll want to read the book after that. And you know what? As awesome as these are, books are better. So, that's all I have for this one. Thanks for coming. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you at the next one. Bye.